I've said this 1,000 times over, and I would say it 1,000 times over again. DEI hurts the very people it purports to be helping. It's as simple as that. When you have these so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, or let's say affirmative action, as it was once called, or whatever label that you slap on it, what you're doing is disincentivizing those very same individuals from becoming excellent, from superseding expectations. Instead, you are looking to find markers, identity markers that are superficial based upon their ethnicity, based upon their gender, or the lack thereof, put them into positions where sometimes they're not even ready for. In many cases, they're not even qualified. It's not to say they wouldn't be qualified otherwise, but instead, you have put such a low barrier to entry that these very people start to suffer as a byproduct. They can never climb up when it comes to their potential, but instead, they're climbing up the superficial ladder where they're being set up to fail. They will soon fall. They will either find themselves with very low self-esteem because they don't feel that they are good enough or ready for the position that they're in, or they're being placed in a position that they were never built for to begin with. It's like me. I was not destined for the NBA. It don't matter what type of law legislation is the government tries to pass in order to make sure that brothers like me can be in the league. I will suffer in that league. But what about Spud Webb? Spud Webb was 5'6" and he dominated on the court. Really? He dominated? So then why isn't there 100 more Spud Webbs? Huh? Let's be real here. This does not help the people it purports to help. And again, people love to call you a coon, Uncle Tom, Sambo. I've got like new ones on the list. White, black supremacists, obviously agent of white supremacists. There's a collective. There's a multiverse of different insults that are given to black conservatives or black folks who think outside of that democratic plantation. But nevertheless, I want to get into this piece between Jordan Peterson and Dr. Carol Swain. Dr. Carol Swain, I've done a video in the past when she talked about the inconvenient truth about the Republican Party, and she broke this down at a cellular level. How the Republican Party, from its formation all the way into its current manifestation, has been the true representation of quote-unquote human rights. They were formed on the basis of the abolition of slavery as well as the abolition of polygamy. And from that point on out, they were the first ones to have the first black senators. When the Democrats were pushing for Jim Crow laws, they were the first ones to vouch for women's right or women's suffrage, while the Democrats were filibustering such laws, trying to make sure they didn't pass. Even the Civil Rights Act was passed in a majority House and Senate that were Republican, but they don't tell you that part, do they? Now, that being said, let's get into this. I finally refilled my water. For y'all who watch my videos, you know I'm always talking about next video, I'm going to refill my water, and then it never happens because then the next video comes and they ain't with no water. So here we are. Make sure to get yourself some water and let's get into it.
Spend a lot of time studying the literature on managerial success. There's quite an extensive business literature on managerial success. And one of the findings of the managerial literature is that many managers fail because they're promoted to a position that they're not actually competent to manage.
The Peter principle.
So, exactly that. It's and the rule as an employer is something like, and I've learned this the hard way with my enterprises, do not do someone a favor when you're hiring them, because it's not a favor. If you take someone and you aren't thoroughly convinced that they're competent for the job, all you're doing is either setting them up for eventual failure, or you're downloading all their obligations to their minions, who will have to work much harder under the thumb of an incompetent who's likely to become a tyrant, joylessly and without credit to pick up the overflow. And there is nothing in that. You also simultaneously demoralize the other managers who were hired on merit. It's a catastrophe.
Absolutely. I've heard so many stories of people in every rank of work. I'm talking about the people who work at the door at a Walmart, to people who are, mid-level to higher level executives who are not given an opportunity now on the basis of merit, on how good they actually would do the work, the qualifications, etc. And I'm not just talking about a college degree. College degree don't mean diddly shit, especially nowadays. It's being revealed that there are very few, a handful of degrees that actually mean anything. I'm talking about time on task, the ability to do a job, leadership skills, etc. Right? So you say, well, how could you quantify? How do you know somebody is qualified? Can they get the job done efficiently? Are they adding to the bottom line, or are they a liability? Simple as that. And a lot of these DI programs, the reason they're getting rolled back, even though these companies have become super woke, is because they're unprofitable. If they were making money, they would double and triple down. They would create a bigger department within each organization. Hell, they would just make the company just a DEI company if it was a profitable thing, but it doesn't profit because you have to choose two different things. I forget who it was. Maybe it was Mildred Friedman or somebody of that nature who said you can either choose competence or you can choose diverse, quote unquote, diversity, because it's not real diversity. It's just diversity of skin color or difference in gender, but it's not necessarily saying diversity in thought process. As a matter of fact, it disincentivizes and attacks those who do not have the same thought process.
And I see that happening in spades in academia. And so one of the consequences of that, at least early on, was that there might have been a disproportionate number of unqualified minority students being admitted, but the probability that they would actually graduate was very low.
Yes.
So they tended to, and then you can understand how that would even further heighten racial tension, because if you're brought into a school and everybody tells you that you belong there and then you fail, it's very attractive, especially if you're being shouted at by the progressives to do this constantly, to blame something like systemic racism for your failure. Yeah, right. Well, and you can understand why,
And we're focused on higher education. Look what they're doing at K through 12, where they're telling, minority children, they're telling everyone that math is racist. There's almost no job that you can do that you don't need math. Even an artist needs math. And so they're taking minority students, and rather than trying to equip the ones, that have the ability to learn.
Oh, but I should actually, a list of new things that are racist. So math is racist. Obesity is racist. Losing weight is racist. What else is racist? God, there's just so many. Reading racist. IQ racist. God. SATs racist. The list just continues. My God, it's a lot to keep up with,
They're telling them that if you're not, doing well in math, it's because it's racist.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's an extremely, so psychologically, that's extremely demoralizing. Like, we know that people who have an external locus of control, that's the technical term. You may have encountered this in your psychology classes. If you believe that your life is governed by external forces, you allow yourself to believe that, you're much more likely to be ineffectual, depressed, anxious, and hopeless.
Which means if you hold the belief that you have no control over your own life, which is the most detrimental belief system, it's the entire foundation of why I do the things that I do, why I say what I say, in spite of the backlash that I oftentimes get. Because I understand that if somebody believes that they're not able to take control of their own life and some external factor is in control of them, you're royally cooked. You're done. You're finished from the beginning. You cannot seize the opportunity. You can be in the midst of the greatest opportunity in your life, and if you're seeing racism, sexism, homophobia, you will not seize that opportunity and you will get no results. As simple as that. For me, I had to let go of that victim mentality and say, you know what? You have a gift that you've been given. You have a truth to speak, and you have these platforms that are out here to allow you to put your voice out there. And guess what? When I finally stopped making excuses and blaming everybody else, I started putting content out into the world. And now, y'all are here tuning in. I got people on all the platforms that I have out. I might have been making a few dollars before, then a few $100 and a few $1,000. You understand me? The blessings are a byproduct of what I'm sowing, what I'm doing, how I'm moving. I can't cry racism all day and expect to get some type of result out of that besides more of the very same stress and the stuckness that I've been experiencing times past.
Okay, so that's not a great outcome, because you don't succeed, plus you're miserable, and you have no happiness. And those are separable things, right? And so, whereas if you have an internal locus of control and you believe that you're an active agent in the construction of your own destiny, then you obviously have to take on more responsibility, but you have a lot more hope and you're much less likely to be depressed and anxious, and you're more likely to be effectual and successful. And the victim-victimizer narrative is an external locus of control narrative. It's like, you can't succeed. The cards are stacked against you by evil, malevolent people who perhaps were even around before you were born. There's nothing you can do. Well, and then if you do fail, it's because of these, forces.
This also goes, it's like, there's people talking about, because your ancestors went through. It's the same as saying, like, you're where you are because of a past life and a past. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. At least with the past life one, they tell you, well, you can kind of do these things to correct. But as far as this element of there is a system that is against you, that is suppressing you, that is the reason, the foundational reason why you're not getting your ass up out of bed this morning, the reason why you didn't get up on time, the reason why you didn't go and do the thing necessarily to get the result that you wanted to get was because of the white man. That's the issue right there. At least them folks who talk about, past lifetime, I went through so much trauma, past lifetime, I went through, like, what about this lifetime? What about this one right here, right now? And I'm guilty of a lot of this stuff. A lot of the spiritual teachings that I ended up getting into, a lot of it I had to backtrack and say, wait a minute, what in here is actually genuinely grounded in reality? What here is actually valuable? And what I walk away with is personal agency, the ability to do, to think, to act for self, to change my own programming. If there is trauma that, is underlying, then it's my job to be the corrector of those unresolved aspects of myself. Simple. I mean, it's not always simple. It may be the hardest thing you ever do, but it is in your hands nonetheless.
Forces that are arrayed against you. And of course, there is some corruption in the systems, and there has been racism and ethnic bias. And so there's some of that criticism that's true. But as a comprehensive explanatory framework, it's the victim-victimizer narrative that turns the world into enmity.
Let me say this. I believe that what progressives are doing to minority communities, Black and Hispanic, that is criminal. And part of it is that they really do want to overthrow, traditional institutions, and the crime and the dysfunctional behavior that you find in the Black community. Progressives excuse it. They encourage it. And so they're really using people's misery. Even with the LGBTQ community, they're using people's misery to advance a political goal. I don't think they care anything about any of the groups that they claim to represent.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's delve into that a little bit. So there's a section of the literature on psychopathology that includes what are called cluster B personality disorders. Okay, so if you have a cluster B personality disorder, one of them is histrionic. That's sort of a derivation of the old Freudian hysteric. You're dramatic. Everything around you is a drama, right? You're a drama queen, because it's often a female pathology, by the way. Histrionic personality disorder. So you're a drama queen. You play the victim. You make mountains out of molehills continually. You take a simple situation and you complicate it, and you make sure that the attention is focused on you while you're dealing like a martyr with your difficult life. So that's histrionic. That's not much fun. Narcissistic, which means you want unearned social attention and status, and you'll do anything to get it. Then there's borderline personality disorder, which is probably the most serious of all the personality disorders, and it's characterized by a pronounced tendency to victimize, and by radical emotional instability. And so that's not much fun. And then you have antisocial personality disorder in that category as well. And that's more male, and it leads more to like overt criminality. Okay, so now the reason I'm telling you that is because those are the people who are most likely to pathologize a victim-victimizer narrative. So if you're dealing with someone who's in that personality disorder cluster, they're after power and attention, the way they camouflage that is by presenting themselves either as a victim or as an ally of victim.
I.e., what they're now calling, what is the word? Fragile narcissism or something? I call it covert narcissism, which is using empathy, which is using quasi-compassion, sympathy and pity, woe is me, in order to get that narcissistic supply. I did an entire video. It's probably one of the most popular videos on X so far that I put out, where I was breaking down the comparisons, and not just the comparisons, the actual unclinical. I'm not a psychologist, not a licensed one at least, but the breakdown of the characteristics or the attributes of a covert narcissist and how they are directly aligned with the far left woke ideologue. I mean, it's verbatim. Y'all make sure to check out. I think I might have put the video on YouTube as well. So check that out. But again, the parallels are uncanny. They are uncanny. And for those who know a little bit about narcissism, you know what I'm talking about.
So, right. So that's fun. So the most serious personality disordered types are the kind who will use their own misery, even if it's self-induced, and the misery of others to camouflage their own power seeking. And I see a tremendous amount of that in the so-called progressive movement, because they are, you put your finger on it. They're using and probably abetting the misery of others, these ethnic minority groups they claim to be compassionate to. They're using that as a justification for their own ideology and for their own power striving. That happens even within families. Is the real cluster B types, they'll make victims out of their own children just so they can parade themselves as martyrs. It's really ugly. It's really ugly.
Well, to go to something positive, I feel like these people are strategically placed, but they are by no means the majority. And whether we're talking about Congress that's dysfunctional, it's because the people who have common sense have no courage, because they could stand up to the extremists. And I believe the extremists, the ones that are driving the agenda, they are a minority, but they are placed in a way everyone's afraid to challenge them.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt they're a minority. There's no doubt there's a minority. But the thing is, you don't want to underestimate the strategic brilliance of the approach. Because if I position myself as either a victim or an ally of victims, which is even more convenient because then I don't have to go through the trouble of being a victim. But now I'm making the case that everything compassionate and loving resides in me.
They believe it,
and
though.
So I know they do. Well, but then the upshot of that is, so I'm one of these people now, compassionate to a fault. Now, if you oppose me, I can easily just say, well, you're against compassion. What sort of person is against compassion?
It's gone so far that if you speak on the mutilation of children's genitalia, that's now seen as uncompassionate, unloving, transphobic. If you view it as problematic that babies are being unalived en masse, and that's being used as a form of contraception, you are now seen as the bigot, the woman-hating misogynist. That's a psyop right there. That's brainwashing 101. 1984 type stuff right there. Thought police type stuff.
Only the worst of the predators that could possibly be against compassion. You wouldn't be one of the worst of the predators, would you be? And so that's the accusations that come out right away, and if those are made out against people who have some conscience, and so the typical conservative, for example, tends to be high in conscientiousness. If you make allegations like that, especially as a mob against someone conscientious, the conscientious person is likely to think, oh my God, all these people are upset with me. I probably did something wrong, and maybe I am a little more sexist than I should be, and maybe I am a little more racist. The psychopaths and the cluster B types, they have no shame.
Right.
So if you accuse them of something, they don't care. But if you accuse a conservative or someone of decent moral standing, you're going to put them back on their heels. And that's also part of the reason that people are afraid to speak.
The silent majority is a very real phenomenon, and it's the reason why this madness has gotten as far as it has. And I am guilty as anybody else. Back in 2016, 17, I was already on my journey of becoming a conservative. Already stepped off the Democratic plantation. But I hid. I was afraid. I said nothing. Because I believe that, well, I knew that if I was to fully come out, then I would get the backlash. And now I've become accustomed to it. It's like part of my lifestyle at this point, right? No more hiding. I'm here, Mr. Coon himself. The regular old Uncle Tom, Yeah. So appreciate y'all for tuning in. If y'all want to watch the whole video by itself, make sure to click the link below. Help out poor Jordan B. Peterson and his little page. He only has 8.45 million subs, so make sure to sub to him and help him to grow his page. That little old page right there. Nah, it's well deserved actually. He has a lot of haters, and to be honest with you, all the haters out there who hate him just because and call him alt-right and listen to all sorts of mess about who this man actually is as opposed to listening to him. Y'all can do the thing that y'all can do if you are a hater of my own, which is you can.
I used to be afraid of the dark, a place unknown like a heart in their heart. I used to see my life in the bar. Now the kids unchained, every shackle is lost. 2 steps in the moonlight, 2 step in the daytime. You just know when it feel right. You got a feeling the time's not. See you through those shades that I just threw on. Through my lenses, you just can't do no wrong. I fell in love with myself again. I fell in love with myself. I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him illuminate the night. I know the time is taking. A 365, that's a